No, you don't need the.
I'm doing this my way.
He a legend, he a legend, he a legend. He a legend, he a legend, he a legend.
Talking on it though, then
He
you
a
can't work it up
legend.
later.
Welcome to the league, to the league, to the league, to the league, to the league. Welcome to the league, to the league, to the league, to the league, to the league of Idols.
What's up, everybody? It's Pikel with League of Items, and I'm great at doing this once again. And here we are. I'm joined by Alex, aka Jskelts, on Twitter.
Howdy, howdy.
So in this video, we're going to continue talking about Worlds. We have to talk about the Worlds qualifying series, which pits the worst team from North America and the worst team from Europe that have qualified for Worlds against one another. Hopefully they don't embarrass themselves too much, but we can't make any promises about that. It probably will be quite embarrassing at some point during Worlds. It was funny because before we jumped on to make this video, Jskelts said, "It'll be nice to talk about this with someone who's watched more League of Legends than I have." And I said, "I don't know if that's true." It's probably true. I watched a little bit of like the end of the LPL, LEC, LCK. I watched like some of the playoffs, but I think that it's going to be a lot different. But I think we should probably just get straight into it. So first, let's talk about the stuff that you have on the screen right now. So can you go through this list and kind of what it means for the viewers?
Yeah, sure. So this is just kind of my basic power rankings. I certainly wouldn't take this stuff and go bet games with it, but this is just kind of trying to derive basic power rankings, like Pythag power rankings.
Yeah.
And so the win rate column is essentially how often does this team win against an average team amongst the teams listed. So these are some pretty strong teams, right? Obviously, every team here is one of the best teams in the world. Essentially saying JG would have a 77% win rate in a single game, side selection not included, against an average team, so a team with a rating of 0.5. And then you can just go from there and kind of figure out how you want to approach that. But it's essentially saying that the Western teams are kind of in trouble. G2, or at least from my perspective, G2 looks stronger than the rest of them, but yeah, for the most part, I don't think it will be surprising to anybody if Korea and China dominate once again.
True. I agree. So let's talk about the first match, kind of that matters in particular. So what do you think, outside of the rankings, what do you think about BDS against Golden Guardians?
Yeah, it's an interesting matchup. I think that, obviously for my power rankings, I think Golden Guardians are a better team. I don't think it's by much. And it's always interesting to kind of look around Twitter, and people seem to be kind of surprised that Pinnacle has, or random books have, Golden Guardians as a favorite. I do think it's really close, and always with Worlds, especially this one, we have like a really long layoff from the end of Summer Split to the beginning of Worlds. We have a new patch that like no one's played on in the Worlds, like in a competitive scene.
Mm-hmm.
So there's a lot of variables that are just kind of like, things could have changed and we have no idea. So things are probably really close together. There's a lot of just like wide ranges of outcomes. BDS looked really good in spring, right? They won the regular season, I think, and then in summer they kind of underperformed. Golden Guardians got second in spring, and then they did the same thing in the regular season in summer, but they got, I think, Shadow Realmed by TL in the playoffs, so they underperformed there, and then now they're coming off of that to Worlds. It's really just a battle of like, do you think BDS is as good as their spring performance, or do you think they're kind of as good as their summer performance? Whereas Golden Guardians, they've stayed the same from both splits. You kind of know how to rank them against the rest of the North American teams. Yeah, lots of moving variables with patches and layoffs and team performances all over the place. So, very interesting matchup. I would give the edge slightly to Golden Guardians, but I don't think it's by much.
Sure. So I think you've mentioned a couple things that are important to highlight. We don't know exactly how this patch is going to play out because we never do. Worlds begins and there are champions that people didn't expect. There are like roles that are more powerful than other roles, which is sometimes a complete shift in the meta. And that's why it's even more important to have a baseline understanding of player strength, talent level, and their like carry ability. So if we're in a tank jungle meta, it's going to be much more difficult for carry junglers to express themselves unless there's a huge talent differential between the two teams, because if you're JDG and you're playing against the Brazilian team, you're probably going to be able to win like 80% to 90% of the games without even drafting intelligently, as long as you play the game like in a serious way. Like if you're intentionally feeding or something, that's not going to count. So that's important. So let's go through with that in mind. Let's go through this matchup one more time. I'm going to go lane by lane. So Adam against Licorice. Adam is the kind of player that does have carry upside. Everybody's was really excited about him before it like became clear that he was just a very toxic person and player, and he's kind of gotten past that, and that's not really brought up as much anymore. But I think it does stem from like his carry mentality. He wants to be the most important player on his team and get a bunch of the resources and stuff like that. So against Licorice, I think that Licorice has played against better carry top laners, so I'm not really too concerned with the matchup. I think that from a consistency perspective, Licorice is the more reliable player. And we're getting to a point, I know that you pay attention to a lot of other sports. Like, what sport do you follow that has really old players?
Really old players. That's tough to. I mean, depends how you define old. I mean, golf probably has like the oldest subset.
Competitive
if you
players,
count,
like old competitive players.
Yeah, golf is probably like the smallest drop off between older guys, unless you count Yarmir Yager in hockey. But
yeah, I was thinking hockey. Like there are a decent amount of players like high, like upper 30s, where like the people that are coming into the league are like in their 20s, or like basketball, we're kind of getting into that spot just because of LeBron. But like soccer, I think a lot of soccer players can hold on to their primes for a long time, for like between 10 to 15 years, just because there's more than just the athleticism side of it. And I think we're kind of getting to a point in League of Legends where the quote-unquote athleticism and mechanics is still very important and can be game-breaking, and is what allows younger players to kind of separate themselves, unless they have some ridiculous innate game knowledge and like intuition for the game. But like I think it's funny how this is the type of roster that we're seeing from Golden Guardians that is able to make that kind of evolution into something, because you have River and Gory, who are the core of the team. River has had a ton of international experience. That's one of the things I think will be pretty important in this matchup specifically, because he's played, I think, at 2 different Worlds, 2 different MSIs, was a highly thought of player, and coming to the LCS, he instantly was one of the better junglers. It's just I think that his team kind of held him back for a while. Gory has played in the LCK before, has been on a couple of different very good teams, including T1, and then Stixxay and Huhi, they've been to World Championships as well. And the year of like the Tristana meta, people kind of thought CLG had a realistic chance of being competitive at Worlds. I don't think that really materialized, but Stixxay was at least interesting. I think that was the year that IG won, which just was an insane year for League of Legends in general. So going back to the lane by lane, Sheo against River, I prefer River. Nuke/Nuclear Int against Gory. I don't really have a big opinion on this one. I think that, just the Eastern bias kind of stuff would put me onto Gory. I would just assume that, a former T1 player is better than Nuclear Int, who like got kicked from an LCS team at one point. Crowny, aka Crown Shot, he was benched at various points. I think he's always been kind of perpetually overrated. And then Lebrav, I think, is a pretty good support. So in general, I think it's obvious that, as a team, BDS definitely has avenues to win this matchup. Personally, I would prefer Golden Guardians as well. But at the end of the day, this really isn't the most important aspect of Worlds. Like, I don't expect Golden Guardians to go very far. I don't expect BDS to go very far once they get into the next portion. So, this team, the team that comes out of this, may eventually be in the Swiss, but I don't think that they'll be a big player in that format.
Yeah, I think I agree with that. Only thing I'd say is mostly what you're touching on. Like, we kind of know what these players are for Golden Guardians. Lots of them have been around for many, many years. And BDS is kind of a roster that got put together like halfway through the season. So I do think that you're spot on with, like, I don't think either one of these teams is likely to make it very far. I think that Golden Guardians probably wins this matchup, but if you were thinking about just like wide ranges of distributions for BDS, I think they're probably more likely to make a deep run than Golden Guardians is, if that makes sense.
Sure. I'd have to
not by much, but the odds to get out of the Swiss stage maybe 0.5%, 0.1% higher than Golden Guardians, but I think Golden Guardians advances here more often than BDS does.
Yeah. I think that I haven't spent much time looking at the individual matchups and like the team profiles that are in here, because I guess it depends on the meta too. If this ends up being a carry top meta where everybody kind of just plays into it, if one of the guys in this, and I guess Licorice kind of doesn't get enough credit for his ability to carry, but there are games where he can kind of put the team on his back. But if one player was going to decide this match, I would expect it to be River, just being the best, probably the best player in the matchup. Yeah, but if you told me Adam completely ran over top lane and put his team on his back, that wouldn't really shock me either. Although I don't think Licorice is like prone to that kind of mistake pretty often, and I think that Golden Guardians will probably be the more intelligent team overall. But that's basically it for those teams. Let's go back to your power rankings. So let's go through from the bottom to the top real quick. Just give me some like instant thoughts on all the teams, and then we'll throw them into a tier list.
Yeah, sure. So I think where kind of my knowledge fails is I don't have these like good player takes, or this guy is going to do this within the meta type of stuff. That's not really my strength or kind of what I rely on. But I would say that the European teams at the bottom are probably ones that didn't perform that well in the most recent split. Just kind of weighting more recent data higher, which I think is fairly straightforward. So one thing I will say is Mad Lions. I always underrate Mad Lions, and they always cram it down my throat in the playoffs. Like, I think mostly what that is just like their coaching is probably insane. And once it gets into best of fives, their coaching really shines, and the decision making really shines because they just have more opportunities to express it, right? So, I think in best of ones, Mad Lions might be, according to me, for whatever that's worth, they might be in trouble, but definitely a capable team, definitely an experienced team. Lots of guys that can make deep runs into tournaments. And if they get into best of fives, you might see some upset potential. I think up above them, I had NRG or Team Liquid.
Oh yeah, I'll throw it back up there for you.
Yeah, no, you're fine. I kind of have it up too. But yeah, so NRG, NRG is an interesting team. Like, they actually won the LCS, which was totally unexpected. Mm-hmm. I think a lot of people were happy with that. A guy like Dokla winning LCS is awesome. But on the other side, like, I think we kind of know what we're going to get with a lot of these guys. There's no real, there's no real surprises here. Right? Yeah, like FBI and Ignar, like, totally great players. Ignar especially is a guy that's done really well at Worlds. But do we think these guys have any sort of chance to make a deep run at Worlds? I really doubt it.
Yeah.
TL, I think APA or APA, as I don't know which one he prefers to go by. He's an interesting one because he's new, right? Mm-hmm. And so that's always cool. And they really turned it around after the spring split where they finished 8th. And not that they did anything spectacular in summer, but they looked like a stronger team. They have a guy that's new, and maybe this is a team that actually has like a higher end than we think. Fnatic is an interesting one. I always love Trimby. I think he's a very underrated player. Mm-hmm. And I think you always kind of see a team sign Trimby and then they immediately elevate their play. And so I wasn't surprised that happened to Fnatic, and then suddenly they're in the summer finals. Again, just like kind of a new lineup. This Oscar versus Wonder type of stuff is also interesting. And again, just some of the best players that Europe has had to offer in terms of humanoid and Razork. I think a team with potential for a Western team, but tough to say. I don't know if you need me to go over Golden Guardians again. Kind of went over them. I would rate them slightly above Fnatic, which I think is probably surprising to people. Obviously, if Fnatic, things change throughout the tournament. These are just kind of like baseline projections. But I would have Golden Guardians then. Then Cloud9, obviously the best team in North America. They didn't really change anything outside of MNS. But they've done great domestically. Have they done well internationally? I don't think they've done great at all.
Nope.
And we kind of know, like we've seen Fudge and Blabber. We've seen this team at Worlds and MSIs before, and they just kind of struggle. And then G2, I think, is kind of like the Western hope. I think this team could absolutely make a run. Caps is probably the best Western player in League of Legends history. And Yike looks incredible. Mickey looks like he's returning to old form. Broken Blade has a huge ceiling. Same thing with Hans Sama. I think this is a team that's actually quite dangerous at Worlds and probably maybe not underrated, but a team with a huge ceiling that I think could do some damage. But yeah, I think overall, like the best Western team is very clearly G2, followed by C9, and then everyone below it is kind of mix and match until you get to BDS, which I think is a step below. But there's not a ton separating the non-C9 group from each other.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so let's see how I can do this. I should have thrown those teams into, let's see, 1, 2, because I want to make a tier list real quick. So going through your power rankings again, just give me the team that was in last place. That was BDS, right?
BDS, yeah.
Okay, so BDS, BDS, I'm going to say I agree with that. I think they're probably last place. Adam is the one chance they have. All right, next.
Mad Lions.
Mad Lions. All right, so Mad Lions is, I think that they're definitely more talented than, BDS as well. My problem with them is that I think that Chasey, from the international perspective, is going to be a big question mark for me. El Yoya is a really good carry jungler, but is that going to be good enough at a Worlds with carry junglers who are just much better than him? And will the meta even fit him? Probably not. Niski, I don't like Niski's playstyle. That's just when Showmaker exists, Niski's not allowed to be good. Like, Showmaker will do what Niski does, but then also be amazing. So that's kind of an issue. And then Carzzy, super aggressive. I like Carzzy's playstyle. I wouldn't really mind if this team did well. I just don't expect it, and I think that it's more likely there will be betting opportunities against them because of public perception being far off of them. But I would definitely have them better than BDS. Next up,
NRG.
NRG. So NRG, I think if we just compared them to Mad Lions, heads up, I would say Chasey against Dokla, I'd take Chasey. Contracts against Elyoya, I would take Elyoya. Palafox against fair, Niski. Yeah. What's that?
That one's unfair. Contracts against Elyoya, it's not very fair.
Yeah. Niski and Palafox. I think I'd probably take Palafox. And then FBI and Ignar against Carzzy and Hylissang. That's a close one. I think that FBI is probably more consistent than Carzzy right now, but I do like having 80 carries with huge upside. It really depends on the meta. Ignar against Hylissang. Hylissang definitely has had the better career, but they're both kind of in the same vein of super aggressive supports that don't really mind dying if it means putting your team in a position to win. So I think I would definitely take Mad Lions over NRG. Next,
Team Liquid.
Team Liquid. So Team Liquid is very interesting for me this year because I think that, and this might seem strange or kind of square, but I think that there will be a huge advantage to having essentially four Korean players on the team. Core JJ, Pyosik, and Summit have all played in Korea and are from Korea. Yun, I think, is from North America, but is Korean. They had the whole idea of playing 5 Korean players. Appa is a big problem for me. I think he's not good at all, and he is really going to be the potential player that holds back the team. the only way that it ends up not mattering is if it's the type of meta where, you can play supportive mid laners that just control their wave and go to team fights and stuff like that, which we've seen that before. I forget the mid laner. I think it was Crown. I think he went from world champion to the LCS and then just got dumpstered because he was like a Mouse player, which it's important.
Clown.
Yeah, it's important to like have those types of skills, but there are certain metas where you're just not going to be the most important person on your team. It's like leading indicator, trailing indicator stuff. So I would say, honestly, everybody knows I love Piosik. Piosik won me 4 figures last year at Worlds, even though he tried throwing away everything. But Summit is a really good carry top laner. It's going to be explosive. They're going to be exciting to watch, and I think that they're just going to be like, YOLO, I don't give a fuck. We're going to try to win, and if we look stupid along the way, that's fine. So I probably like Team Liquid more than Mad Lions.
That's fair. Next, I have Fnatic. And first, you can never be more square than me, so don't worry about what you're saying.
With Fnatic, I'm the biggest anti-humanoid person on the face of the earth. I don't think that he's a bad person. I think that he's extremely overrated in League of Legends, and it's the same thing as Nisqy. Nisqy humanoid Showmaker is like a Pokemon evolution. Nisqy is Squirtle. Humanoid Wartortle. Showmaker Blastoise. Showmaker can take on your entire team on his own at certain points. Humanoid, there are so many conditions that have to be met. Theoretically, could he beat Showmaker in a game? Yes. Is he going to beat him in a match? Most likely no. And it's because Showmaker is just better than him. Oscar, I don't know enough about him. I know that he's going through some kind of medical stuff right now, which is why Wonder had to step in. Oscar should be fine to play in Worlds. I'm not gonna put much faith in him. Razork's a good jungler. He's not good enough against a lot of the Eastern junglers. Piosik from Team Liquid is a better jungler than Razork. People might not remember that, or they might not want to admit that right now because Piosik didn't perform above expectations in the LCS, and Razork has been somewhat consistent. Noah, I don't really know much about Noah. And then Trimby, I agree, Trimby's a very good support. Trimby might be the best player in that theoretical matchup between Fnatic and Team Liquid. I would probably prefer Piosik and Core JJ. Or no, I would probably prefer Piosik because of his upside. But Trimby might just be better than Core JJ at this point. So I'm fine with that. Where would I put them? I would put them ahead of Team Liquid, but the same tier.
Gotcha. So next I have the Golden Guardians.
Golden Guardians. So this one is tough for me. I don't think that I can put them above Mad Lions. So let's talk through the let's talk through the Team Liquid matchup. So I mean, the consistency of Licorice can beat Summit in a match. It doesn't mean that he's the better player. It just means that the consistency can win out. River and Gory, could they win against Piosik and Appa? I think, yeah, they could, because Appa is going to be a liability. And then Yon and Core JJ against Stixxay and Huhi. They could draft themselves into a good spot against them. It's another one where I don't think there's a huge differentiating amount between those teams. So my gut would say,
I mean, for what it's worth, Golden Guardians went 2-0 against them in the regular season, and then lost to them in the playoffs. So it is quite close.
Yeah, I'll probably leave it like that then, just after Mad Lions. I get, if the matchup presented itself at Worlds, I would maybe go the other way, specifically in that matchup. But I think the other matches are more important for me, and that's more of what the tier list is for. You know what I mean? So.
Yeah, it all depends on the price, right? If you're getting, Golden Guardians plus 500, obviously, then Golden Guardians is the play. But yeah, then C9.
C9, yeah, I'm excited for C9. I think that Fudge, Blabber, M&S, Berserker, Sven. I think Berserker, this could be the spot for Berserker going back to Korea. was like not really threatening Gumayusi to take over the bot lane for T1, but Gumayusi has said he has a ton of respect for Berserker. Berserker had an okay Worlds last year, considering C9 kind of fell flat. I'm not sure if M&S is really going to be able to stand up to this level of competition. I don't really have any questions about Fudge or Blabber. It's really like, can M&S and Sven do enough to, you know, be competitive in the be competitive enough to get to the knockout round? And I think that it's possible. It's just they're not going to be the difference makers. So I think we're really going to have to see Berserker kind of put the team on his back, which is really how they're built, is to let him be the most important player, you know, once you get into the mid game and late game. Fudge and Blabber are definitely pretty good in the early mid game too. So I think that they're the best out of the teams that we talked about so far, and I think that they're probably a tier better than everybody else.
Yeah, I'd agree with that. And then obviously finally is G2.
Yeah, G2. One thing you mentioned about Mad Lions having a good coach. I think that Dylan Falco is the best Western coach of all time, and it's just the gap is getting larger and larger as time goes on. Like he does enjoy the benefit of having like a lot of really good rosters from his time on like Fnatic and G2. But this team, the way that it's constructed, like, could you upgrade from Hansama? Yes. Could you upgrade from Broken Blade? Yes. But what do you get with those players specifically? You get extreme flexibility in draft. Mickey, very good support. Hansama, a good utility, 80 carry. Not as good of a carry, 80 carry, which, you know, the distinction's probably lost on some of the people watching, but that's not really important. Caps has one of the biggest champion pools in the world, like rivaling a lot of the Eastern mid laners. Yike, right when I looked at Yike's champion pool, when they announced that he was going to be coming in and he was a carry jungler, I was like, oh, that's perfect. This guy's just going to get all the attention. Caps is going to be flexible. Broken Blade is going to be flexible. Everybody else is going to play around Yike. And then it's like a Belveth meta. Yike comes in and dominates everybody. That was kind of hilarious. So I do have pretty big, pretty high expectations for G2 at Worlds this year. And part of that's because I think a lot of the best players in the world, or like out of the top 40 best players in the world, I think probably 15 to 20 of them didn't qualify. So if this tournament comes down to like individual standout performances, it's less likely to be the big differentiating factor between teams, because a lot of those guys just aren't here. Like the true separators at their positions, like some of them just aren't here. So I think that G2 is definitely a tier ahead of Cloud9. I don't think that they have. I think that they. What would you put their odds at to win the World Championship?
Pretty low. Definitely low single digits. I mean, the competition is just so fierce at the top end. Like you truly have some killer teams here. Like I'll never count G2 out. They're probably the only Western team that has like a real shot.
Mm-hmm.
But I would just say like off the top of my head, probably like 3%.
Okay,
quite low.
I think it's better than that. And it almost feels like a trap, but I'm kind of just looking at the rosters. I'm really not as afraid of some of the Eastern teams as much as I normally am, because what happens is like you'll go into a Worlds like last year where people were underrating a lot of the Eastern teams because the names weren't as flashy and like recognizable as we expect. But then this year is kind of the opposite. It's a lot of names that we know, but are they really going to be huge difference makers in individual games and matches? And, you know, I look at a team like LNG. Like, I like LNG a lot. They have great players on their team. But if you told me that G2 beat LNG in a match because they were able to draft in a way that LNG wasn't prepared for, that really wouldn't surprise me. So it really comes down to, like, can they get themselves into a spot where the talent is close enough and the drafts are good enough, strong enough to carry them or to make the winning difference? I could definitely see that. Then when you get to the finals, you know, it's really tough. Like, do I think that G2's talent level is similar to DRX's talent level from last year? I think so. I think it's good enough. It's good enough, and then you need some stuff to break your way. Like the meta needs to be the right fit. The matchups need to be good enough. Like the boxing analogy where like styles make fights. Like if they get into the right matchup in the finals where it's two completely different styles of League of Legends, then they've got a shot. But that's asking for a lot.
Yeah, I mean they're the best Western team by far. I think one problem people are running into is they're just kind of looking at what happened at MSI. Not that that's wrong; it's a very important data point, but they're just using MSI as a barometer, and they're saying JDG is so strong because they were incredible, right? But there was a whole split played after MSI, right? You need to incorporate that, and that's probably more important than what happened at MSI. And so when I see that JDG had a great split and won the finals 3-2 against LNG, I think people are like, wow, LNG is almost as good as JDG, who were the best at MSI. I think people think like, oh, wow, LNG is incredible. Yeah. Whereas I feel that is kind of like the top kind of shrinking, like the gap kind of shrinking at the top end. And so, yeah, I do think that the Eastern teams are going to be very dominant, but I don't think that it's kind of like this JDG is going to run away with it type of World Finals. And it's definitely within striking distance for G2. I don't know about Cloud9. I definitely don't know about any of the other teams, but if you told me G2 won Worlds, I would say that's like, it's unlikely, but I wouldn't be like, wow, there's something wrong with the numbers I ran. I'd say there's like a very real possibility of that happening.
Yeah, because you just have to think about what's the story that I have to tell myself where G2 ends up winning the World Championship, and it's not like a crazy outlandish story. You'd be like, they kept every match really close. They drafted a lot of unique champions. Caps played really well. Yikes surprised some people by being able to carry against like very good junglers. Like that's not outlandish to me. Even with Cloud9, if you said Berserker had the tournament of his life, this is why he was in T1's academy and a potential usurper of Berserker, of Gumayusi. And it's like, yeah, like that would make sense. It would be surprising. It would definitely be surprising, but it's possible. But I think, without getting into any of the other teams, we should probably end this video here, and maybe we will pick things back up, talking about the Eastern teams, maybe combining everything into like one larger tier list or something like that. Anything you want to say before we get out of here?
No, just good luck to everybody following Worlds, betting on Worlds, predicting Worlds. Have fun. Good luck.
Good luck, and have fun.